There comes a time in life when the noise begins to fade. The children grow up and move away. The career titles no longer matter. The applause, the obligations, the constant striving, they all grow distant, like a radio left on in another room. And in that silence, a new truth settles in. Aging doesn't wait. It arrives sometimes gently, sometimes all at once. And when it does, it doesn't ask how much we've loved, how much we've given, or how much we've sacrificed. It only asks one quiet, relentless question. Are you prepared? Not just emotionally, not just physically, but financially. You see, money in old age is not about luxury. It's not about pride or accumulation. It's about freedom, dignity, peace of mind. It's the difference between asking and choosing, between surviving and truly living. Today, I want to talk to you, yes, you, my dear viewer, heart to heart, as someone who has spent years walking beside older adults through the most vulnerable, beautiful, and difficult seasons of life. If you're between the ages of 50 and 80, this message is especially for you. So I invite you to stay with me through this entire video. What you'll hear is more than just advice. It's a collection of truths, emotional, practical, and spiritual, that could reshape the way you prepare for your later years. And if this message touches you in any way, I gently invite you to subscribe to our channel, so you won't miss future stories and insights just like this one. Now, let's begin. 1. Having money is having dignity even when your heart is full of love. They say that love is enough. That children, if raised right, will always take care of their parents. That family is the ultimate retirement plan. But those who have lived long enough know, love, while sacred, is not always enough. Let me share with you a story, one that still haunts me, even after all these years. There was once a couple who had worked their whole lives to raise 3 sons. They had little, but they gave everything. They sacrificed new clothes to buy textbooks, skipped vacations to pay for music lessons. And when the sons finally married and moved away, the parents didn't ask for much, just a phone call, a holiday visit, a little time together. The eldest son, the most ambitious of the 3, moved to the city and prospered. But prosperity, as you may know, can come with a hunger for more. And as his own sons grew and prepared for marriage, he began to worry not about his parents, but about how to afford homes and dowries for his boys. That's when he looked back at the home where his parents still lived, a modest, 3-story house in the countryside. It's too big for them, he reasoned. They don't need it. They'll leave it behind eventually. Why not now? And so, he returned to the village, not out of longing or love, but with a quiet agenda. The parents were thrilled at first. They hadn't seen him in months. The sight of their eldest child brought tears to their eyes. But those tears dried quickly the moment he spoke. "Mom, Dad," he said gently, "why don't you transfer the house to my sons? They'll need it soon. You're not using most of it. It's just sitting there. And besides, wouldn't it make you proud to help your grandsons build a future?" The room fell silent. For a long moment, neither parent spoke. Then the mother, her voice trembling, asked, "And where will your father and I live?" The son didn't hesitate. "You still have your retirement pension. You could move into a nursing home, make new friends, have people your own age to talk to. It would be better that way." That was the moment the silence turned into sorrow. The mother nearly collapsed. She didn't argue. She didn't shout. But she looked at her son, the one she had once nursed through fevers and stayed awake nights for, and saw not a protector but a planner. A planner who had already budgeted her dignity into the cost of a wedding. She asked him to leave. And in the weeks that followed, he called and pleaded. He made more visits. He brought gifts. But the hurt was too deep. Eventually, the parents made a decision, a quiet, final one. They sold the house, moved into a well-rated care home, deposited the money in the bank, to be evenly divided among all 3 sons after their passing. And for the first time in years, they slept peacefully. Not because they were cared for, but because they had cared for themselves. You see, the tragedy wasn't in being asked. It was in realizing that when you don't have money of your own, your dignity becomes negotiable. I've met countless seniors who, after decades of sacrifice, still hesitate to spend on themselves. Let the children take it, they say. They need it more. But I tell them this: your needs are not selfish. Your dignity is not optional. Your independence is not a luxury. It is your right. Having money in old age means you don't have to ask. It means you can say no. It means that when someone knocks on your door, it's because they want to visit, not because they want to claim what's left. And if one day you do need help, it won't come with shame, or strings, or a quiet sigh from the next room. Because you will have already done the most powerful thing an older adult can do. You prepared. You planned. You protected your dignity. So as we move forward in this video, I want you to hold onto that thought. This isn't just about dollars and cents. It's about respect. It's about the power to make decisions, not have them made for you. It's about standing tall even when your back aches, speaking clearly even when your voice trembles, and loving your children deeply without losing yourself in the process. Let us continue. 2. Money brings joy because you deserve more than just survival. There is a cruel lie that gets whispered into the ears of older adults. It doesn't come from strangers. It comes from the world around us, sometimes even from family. At your age, you don't need much. Just stay healthy. Be content. Don't ask for more. But let me tell you something with all the conviction of my years working with seniors. Joy is not a luxury. It is a human right. And the older you are, the more you deserve it. You see, the years we spend working, raising children, supporting spouses, and caring for aging parents often train us to expect very little for ourselves. We get used to putting joy on the back burner. The painting class you always wanted to take? Too expensive. That weekend at the beach? Maybe next year. A new outfit just to feel good in your skin? I'm too old for that. And so the days pass. Quietly. Predictably. But also, emptily. I remember a woman named Ruth who once came into my clinic in tears. She was 68 and had recently lost her husband of 42 years. She said, "Doctor, I wake up every day, eat oatmeal, sit by the window, and wait for the sun to set. I feel like I'm just existing." She didn't say this with drama. She said it with honesty. And that's what broke my heart. Ruth had worked hard all her life, raised 2 sons, paid off a house, took care of her parents until their last breath. And yet, now that the world had grown quiet, she felt forgotten even by herself. When I asked her if she ever did things that made her feel alive, she gave me a faint smile and said, "I used to love the sea. Haven't seen it in 20 years. I looked her in the eye and said, "Then go. Go see it." She blinked in disbelief. "Do you have the means?" I asked. She nodded. "I have a small pension. Some savings." "Then use it," I said. "Not all of it. Just enough to remember who you are." 2 weeks later, she sent me a photo barefoot in the sand, her silver hair dancing in the wind, and a joy in her eyes that no pill could ever prescribe. You see, having money in your later years is not about greed, it's about reclaiming your identity. It's about saying, a yes, I want to travel. A yes, I want to paint. A yes, I want to dine out alone with a good book and a glass of wine and feel proud of it. It's about giving yourself permission to be a full human being, not just someone waiting for the end. Aging is not a punishment. It is a privilege. And those who reach this season deserve not just safety but satisfaction. Not just care but celebration. Let me give you a real example, one that still inspires me to this day. 25 years ago in Shanghai, a woman named Cao Zhizi was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer. She was 51 years old, told she had no more than 3 years to live. She cried, as anyone would. The treatments were harsh. The pain was real. Her body grew frail. Her hair fell out. But her husband, her husband, he retired early, took her hand, and said, "Let's go. Anywhere. Everywhere." And they did. They traveled across Asia, through mountains and deserts, cities and villages. They rode through blizzards in Tibet, got lost in markets in Laos, sang songs on buses in Thailand, took photos in silence under the northern lights. And with each step, something miraculous happened. Her body began to fight. Her laughter returned. Her health stabilized. Her will to live, once a flicker, became a flame. They kept going. They visited over 1,100 locations, drove more than 155,000 miles, and made memories that no illness could erase. And you know what? She lived. Not 3 years, but decades. When asked how they managed it all, her husband said, "We saved for retirement. But instead of just saving to survive, we saved to live." Let that sink in for a moment. How many of us have saved our entire lives, only to arrive at old age and feel guilty spending a single dollar on ourselves? How many of us hesitate to buy a nice meal, a flight to see old friends, a massage for aching joints because we worry it's frivolous? But what is money for, if not to give meaning to our days? What is the point of security, if it buys us a life of dull repetition? The truth is, the heart needs what the body cannot provide: joy, meaning, connection, and wonder. And while money can't buy happiness, it can open the door for you to find it again. So if you have something saved, don't wait for the perfect time. Don't wait for every child to be stable. Don't wait for the weather to be perfect, or the body to be painless, or the stars to align. Use what you have wisely, lovingly, joyfully to remind yourself that your life still matters, that your story is still unfolding. Go visit the sea. Enroll in that dance class. Buy that garden chair and sit in the sun without guilt. Because the older you are, the more joy you deserve, not less. Let's not live our final chapters with regret. Let's write them with color, with courage, and with the kind of joy that no one else can give us but ourselves. In the next message, we'll talk about a truth that's often unspoken but deeply felt: how having money in old age allows you to face illness with strength and without shame. Please stay with me, and if this message resonates, share your thoughts in the comments below. I would love to know what brings you joy and how you plan to reclaim it. And don't forget to subscribe, so you'll be the first to receive the next message in this series. Let's continue this journey together. 3. When illness comes, let money carry the burden, not your children. There is a sacred silence that surrounds the rooms of the sick. In hospitals, in bedrooms, in nursing homes. I've walked through them all. And though the sounds may differ, the beeping monitors, the shuffled footsteps, the whispers between nurses, there is always one emotion hanging in the air: guilt. Not from the children, not from the spouses, but from the elderly patients themselves. I'm sorry, they say, over and over. I didn't want to be a burden. I once stood beside an older gentleman, Mr. Harold, who had just been diagnosed with a serious kidney condition. His wife had passed away a decade earlier. His daughter was in her early 40s, raising 2 young kids on a teacher's salary. His son had recently been laid off. And Harold, despite his pain, refused treatment. Why? I asked. He looked me in the eye and said something I will never forget: because I'd rather die in silence than bankrupt my children. That is the hidden fear of so many aging parents. Not death itself, but the cost of staying alive. And this, my dear friend, is where money becomes more than money. In old age, money becomes freedom from guilt, freedom from fear, and freedom from becoming a financial anchor to those you love the most. Because here's the truth many won't say out loud: growing old in America is expensive. Let's look at just a few numbers. The average hospital stay for a senior costs over $13,000. A hip replacement? About $40,000. A cancer treatment can range from $100,000 to $300,000 over a few years. A single round of chemotherapy? Sometimes $10,000 or more, not including scans, follow-ups, and medication. Yes, insurance may cover part. Medicare helps. But there are always gaps. Always out-of-pocket costs. And always those quiet, soul-wrenching conversations between family members. Can we afford this? Should we sell the house? Maybe we should transfer him to a county hospital. And too often, the one lying in the hospital bed hears those whispers and decides it's better to give up than to put the family through financial ruin. But it doesn't have to be this way. Let me tell you the story of Mrs. Elaine Porter. She was 74 when she was diagnosed with acute pancreatitis, a condition that can kill within hours if not treated aggressively. Her neighbors rushed her to the ER. The doctors did what they could. But she needed a specialized surgical procedure within 48 hours. The price tag? Over $25,000 upfront, not including post-op care. Her children panicked. Her daughter, a single mom, began looking into loans. Her son started drafting a letter to their bank. But Elaine stopped them. From her hospital bed, barely able to speak, she handed the nurse a small blue notebook. Inside were the details of her financial planning savings, emergency fund, insurance policies, a list of paid-off debts, and a small handwritten note. To my children, don't spend a penny on me. I've already taken care of this. Just hold my hand, and let me heal in peace. She survived the surgery. And later, when I visited her during recovery, She said something that brought tears to my eyes. It's not that I didn't trust my kids to care for me. I just didn't want their love to turn into worry. I wanted to give them the gift of peace even when I was broken. That is what financial preparedness offers in old age, the gift of peace. Too many of us have grown up believing that depending on our children is part of the aging process. That being cared for means surrendering control. That if we get sick, we must endure not just the illness but the shame of watching our children struggle on our behalf. But I want you to know this. You can change that narrative. You can prepare. You can save now, even if it's small. You can invest in long-term care insurance. You can keep a little account just for emergencies. You can plan ahead so that when illness comes and it will, your money fights the battle, not your children. It is a quiet power, a dignity that shows not only strength, but deep, intentional love. Because love is not just hugs and home-cooked meals. Love, in old age, is telling your child they don't need to choose between your medication and their mortgage. Let me offer one final truth, raw, but real. I once asked a senior doctor, someone who had seen thousands of end-of-life cases, what the most painful moment was for patients. He didn't hesitate. It's not the physical pain, he said. It's when they see the fear in their children's eyes. Not fear of death, but of debt. And in that moment, patients give up not because their bodies can't go on, but because their hearts can't take the guilt. That's why, dear listener, having money in your final decades isn't about pride. It's about protecting your children from decisions they should never have to make. So I encourage you, if you do nothing else this year, start preparing. Build that fund. Get that checkup. Set aside what you can. Even a few $100s saved each month adds up to freedom later. Freedom to choose. Freedom to heal. Freedom to rest with peace, not pressure. And when the day comes that you do need care, whether at home or in a facility, your children can focus on holding your hand, not holding their breath every time a bill arrives. That is the most profound gift you can give them. So let us walk forward with wisdom. You've worked hard. You've raised families. You've given and sacrificed. Now, it's time to care for the one person who has always cared for others, you. In the next message, we'll explore what happens when financial preparation turns into a passport to purpose, how having even modest savings allows you to pursue passions, explore the world, and rediscover the meaning of life. Please stay with me. And if any part of this message touched your heart, I invite you to share your reflections in the comments below. Your story matters. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel. There is so much more wisdom ahead, and I'd be honored to continue walking this journey with you. Let's keep going because you are worth it. 4. Money is the passport to purpose, not just a means to survive. Some people believe that after retirement, life is supposed to slow down. Wake up. Eat. Read. Watch television. Go to bed. Repeat. Safe. Predictable. Quiet. But let me ask you something, my friend. Is that really living? Is that all we were made for after 60, after raising families, paying mortgages, surviving loss, illness, disappointment, and war? Was life meant to become a waiting room for the end? Or could this be your time? Not a pause, but a rebirth. I want to gently offer a different vision. One that thousands of older adults I've worked with have embraced. Retirement is not the end of the road. It's the beginning of a road you finally get to choose. And what gives you that power to choose? Money. Yes, money. Not because it buys happiness, but because it gives you permission to explore who you are without guilt, without limits, and without depending on anyone's approval. Let me tell you about a couple I met in Oregon, David and Marlene. They were both retired school teachers. Never earned more than $45,000 a year. Lived modestly. Raised 3 kids. Paid off their home by the time they were 62. And yet, after retirement, they did something extraordinary. They bought a used RV, saved $20,000 from their retirement accounts, and spent the next 4 years traveling to every single national park in the United States. When I asked David why, he said this: "We spent our whole lives giving. Now it's time to feel alive." They hiked through red canyons, swam in glacier lakes, took pictures of elk and moose and sunrise-colored clouds. Every week, they would send postcards to their grandchildren, with stories written in shaky cursive and photographs full of laughter. And what struck me most wasn't how far they traveled. It was how young they seemed, even in their 70s. They weren't running from old age. They were redefining it. And they could only do that because they had prepared, saved, chosen to live with enough but not too much to still pursue purpose. Now I know traveling isn't everyone's dream. Not everyone wants to hit the road or climb mountains. But purpose? Purpose is universal. You may find it in starting a garden in your backyard, teaching children how to read at your local library, writing the family memoir that only you can write, taking that pottery class you've always wondered about, or simply waking up each morning with a schedule that belongs only to you. Whatever it is, having money allows you to say yes to what gives you meaning. It gives you the freedom to wake up and ask, what do I want to do today? Who do I want to help? What memory do I want to make? And that freedom, my dear friend, is not about indulgence. It's about dignity, identity, purpose. Because without purpose, aging becomes a slow fade into invisibility. But with purpose, aging becomes a renaissance. Let's take a moment to reflect on someone who turned her final years into a masterpiece. Her name was Margaret Dean. She lived alone for the last 15 years of her life. Widowed at 61. Her children moved out of state. Her home grew quiet. But instead of shrinking, she expanded. She enrolled in community college at age 65. She took poetry classes, volunteered at the animal shelter, and began painting landscapes based on memories from her childhood in Vermont. At 73, she held her first art exhibit. At 76, she published her first book. At 79, she passed away in her sleep with no regrets, and a studio full of work that now hangs in homes across a town. Her neighbors raised money to name a small local park bench in her honor. Not because she was famous, but because she mattered. She chose to matter, even when the world had gone quiet. And she told me once, over a cup of chamomile tea, I never thought I'd find myself again after he died. But I did. Because I made sure I had enough to survive and more than enough to create. Here's the truth. Money is not the purpose. But it gives you access to purpose. It lets you buy time. It lets you buy space. It lets you walk away from people and situations that steal your joy. It lets you walk toward new beginnings even if you're 70, 80, or 90. I've worked with cancer survivors who became singers, with veterans who became sculptors, with grandmothers who became YouTubers, sharing recipes and stories to audiences around the world. And all of them said the same thing in different words. I didn't need much. I just needed a little room to grow again. That room, that breathing space, that opportunity to bloom again, it comes from preparation, from intentional saving, from daring to believe that your story isn't over just because you've stopped working. So, if you're sitting there wondering if it's too late, let me say this clearly. It is not. If you're still breathing, you're still becoming. And if you have even a little left in savings, use it not just to live, but to live for something. Even if that something is a paintbrush, a passport, a park bench, a potted plant, or a smile you give a stranger when you volunteer. Your money doesn't have to be big. It just has to be yours. Used on your terms. For your joy. In the next message, we'll talk about something more delicate but just as essential. How to navigate the complicated emotions around children and inheritance, and why your peace must come before their expectations. Please stay with me. And as always, I invite you to share below. What's one thing you've always wanted to do but held back because of age or money? What's your someday dream? Let today be the day you start. And if this message meant something to you, I warmly invite you to subscribe to our channel. Let's keep this community of wisdom, dignity, and purposeful aging growing together. 5. You don't owe your children everything, especially not your peace. There's a moment that comes for many parents, sometime after the children have left home, married, and started families of their own. You see them on holidays. You send money when they are in trouble. You listen, advise, support. And you do it willingly because love for a child never grows old. But then one day, something shifts. They begin to speak less gently. Their visits become shorter. The warmth in their voices turns to calculation. The question isn't how are you, Mom? Or do you need anything, Dad? But, have you thought about who gets the house? Is your will updated? If something happens, can you sign the deed over now to avoid taxes later? You brush it off the first time. Then it happens again. And again. And one day, you realize, you're not being cared for. You're being managed. Let me tell you about a woman I once met. Her name was Nancy. She was 71, widowed, and still living in the same modest home where she had raised 3 children. Her youngest son, Brian, called her regularly. But slowly, the calls turned into reminders. "Mom, the house is getting old. Have you thought about putting it in my name so it doesn't get caught in probate? Mom, you're not using the upstairs rooms. Maybe I can renovate them and rent them out. Mom, I'm just trying to help." She wanted to believe that. She really did. But one day, while she was cooking dinner, she overheard a phone conversation between Brian and his wife. He had accidentally called her while his phone was in his pocket. What she heard crushed her. "If I can get Mom to sign before the end of the year, we won't have to take out that second mortgage. She won't need the house much longer anyway." Nancy didn't confront him. She didn't scream. She didn't even cry. She simply called her lawyer the next morning. She rewrote her will, sold her house a few months later, moved into a small apartment close to her old church, where she volunteered twice a week. She invested the rest. And when asked why she made the change, she answered softly, "Because I realized I was being treated like an obligation, not a person. And my peace matters more than anyone's expectation." This story isn't rare. Too many older adults feel they must sacrifice their own comfort, space, and autonomy for the sake of their children. They give away land, houses, savings accounts, believing that this is love, that this is what good parents do. And sometimes, yes, it is done with joy. But far too often, it's done under pressure, under guilt, under the silent threat of being called selfish if they say no. Let me say this clearly. You are not selfish for protecting your future. You are not wrong for wanting peace. And you do not owe your children everything you've built. You gave them life. You gave them time. You gave them meals, rides, lullabies, tuition, sleepless nights, and unconditional love. That is enough. Now let's talk about something even more vulnerable. Living arrangements. It's a dream for some families to grow old together, to have generations living under one roof, grandchildren laughing in the backyard while grandma knits on the porch. But dreams are not always reality. And sometimes, what sounds beautiful becomes unbearable. Because the truth is, not every child is prepared to care for aging parents. Not every daughter-in-law is patient. Not every son is selfless. I've spoken to countless seniors who moved in with their children, only to be isolated, ignored, or worse, resented. Meals eaten alone in a back room. Whispers behind doors. Being told, "Don't touch that," or "You already took your meds," or "We are busy right now." These wounds don't leave bruises, but they break the heart just the same. That's why, sometimes, the most loving choice is the hardest one. To stay independent. To protect what's yours. To live on your own terms, even if it means fewer visits or harder conversations. There's a phrase I often hear in older communities. Better to pay a stranger to care for you with respect than to live with family who makes you feel like a burden. It's harsh, but it's real. And it brings us back to the core message of this series. Money, in old age, is not about greed. It's about options. It's about safety. It's about protecting your heart, your home, and your hope. Let me tell you about a remarkable man named Charles. He never married. Worked as a janitor for 35 years. Lived in a one-bedroom apartment his whole life. Quiet, humble, gentle. He had 2 nephews who would visit once a year. Just enough to keep up appearances. When Charles retired, no one expected much. But when he passed away at 82, the truth came out. He had saved nearly $400,000. And he left it all not to family but to a scholarship fund for first-generation college students from his old high school. When reporters asked why he didn't leave anything to his nephews, he said, "Because they visited me out of obligation. But these kids, they want a future. And that's worth investing in." Charles understood something powerful. Legacy is not about blood. It's about intention. And peace in your later years should never be sacrificed for people who only show up when it benefits them. So if you're sitting with questions, wondering, or is it wrong to keep my home in my name? Or should I feel bad for not giving my savings to my kids? Or what if they're upset with my decisions? Let me tell you this. It is not your job to make everyone happy. It is your job to protect your peace. Give with joy, not with guilt. Share from abundance, not from obligation. And never forget your comfort, dignity, and serenity are worth just as much now as they were when you were raising children, building careers, or caring for your own parents. You matter. Still. Always. In our next message, we'll talk about something even more personal. The quiet strength of preparing your own end-of-life care so your final chapter can be written with grace, clarity, and love. Please don't miss it. And if this message resonated with you, even in the smallest way, I warmly invite you to share your thoughts in the comments. Your story could be the one that helps someone else speak up, say no, or reclaim their peace. And please subscribe to our channel. There's more wisdom to come, and you are a cherished part of this journey. Let's keep walking together. 6. Preparing for the end isn't giving up, it's one of the deepest acts of love. There are some words that make people uncomfortable. Wills. Hospice. Burial plots. Final wishes. They are words that feel heavy. Final. Unspoken. Words we avoid until it's too late, until someone we love is gone, and we are left grasping for clarity in the midst of grief. But I want to say this gently, as someone who has walked with hundreds of families through the most sacred transitions. Preparing for your final chapter is not morbid. It is not pessimistic. It is not giving up. It is an act of love. It is a gift that speaks when your voice no longer can. A roadmap for those left behind. A final blessing for the ones you've spent your whole life protecting. Let me tell you about Carol. She was 83. Sharp, funny, graceful. She loved jazz music and wore pearls even when she was just cleaning her house. One afternoon, over a cup of coffee, she handed me a brown envelope. "My goodbye file," she said, smiling. Inside was everything. A detailed will. A prepaid cremation plan. Letters to each of her children and grandchildren. A playlist for her memorial service. And even a list of who should take her cat, Pudding, when she passed. When I asked her why she had gone to such lengths, she said something I will never forget. Because grief is heavy enough. I don't want my kids to carry confusion, too. Carol passed away peacefully 2 years later. And when her family gathered to say goodbye, there was sadness, but there was also peace. Laughter. Clarity. Unity. Because she had already made the hardest decisions for them. Her love had written the ending they were too broken to write. Too many families are torn apart, not by death but by the chaos that follows it. They argue over assets, guess about final wishes, fight about who should make decisions. And all of it could be avoided by a simple act of courage. Sitting down and planning for what you want. While you still can. Let's talk practically for a moment. Here's what you can prepare even on a modest income. A simple will, legally signed and notarized. A power of attorney for medical and financial decisions. A living will, also called advance directives, stating your preferences for end-of-life care. A prepaid funeral or cremation options, often available for less than $4,000. A written letter to your children not about money, but about love, forgiveness, and the life you hope they'll live after you're gone. None of this is about control. It's about kindness. It's about saying, "I love you enough to leave you with peace." I once sat with a son who had just lost his father unexpectedly. He was 58. Tough. Stoic. A former Marine. And yet, as he sat in my office, he wept like a child. "Doc," he said, "I just wish I knew what Dad wanted. Where he wanted to be buried. Who he wanted to speak. What to do with his stuff. I don't want to disappoint him, but I'm just guessing." Can you imagine? Carrying the grief of loss, and on top of it, the weight of uncertainty? We don't talk about this enough. We talk about saving, about spending, about protecting ourselves from running out of money. But we forget to ask, have you planned for the moment when your story ends? And have you written a final paragraph you'd be proud of? Let's go deeper. Preparing for death is not just about logistics. It's about forgiveness. It's about legacy. It's about freedom from fear for you and for those who love you. When you write down what matters, you release your family from guessing. You release yourself from regret. You reclaim the final say over what your life meant. And I want to tell you something, clearly and from the heart. You are allowed to decide how you leave this world. You are allowed to ask for music, for poetry, for a moment of silence or a celebration of laughter. You are allowed to say, "I want my ashes spread over the garden," or "I want my funeral simple, quiet, filled with stories and not speeches." You are allowed to leave behind love not just in memories, but in letters, in clarity, in calm. I once met a woman named Helen. She was 88, in a care facility, nearing the end. She had outlived her husband, her siblings, and even one of her daughters. One day, she asked me to bring her favorite scarf soft lilac, with tiny embroidered roses. When I placed it around her shoulders, she looked at me and said, "I want to be beautiful when I go. For myself." Those were her last words to me. And when she passed that night, there was something radiant about her. Something complete. As if she had made peace with every chapter, and this was simply the final sentence. So I ask you, not with pressure, but with love. Have you made your wishes known? Have you written down what matters to you? Have you spoken to your children not just about inheritance but about how you want to be remembered? Because one day, they will sit around a table, trying to be brave. And the greatest gift you can leave them is a plan so they can grieve, and celebrate, and remember, without the burden of decisions they're too broken to make. Money, in this moment, becomes more than numbers. It becomes clarity. It becomes kindness. It becomes the voice that speaks when you no longer can. So use your money, whether a little or a lot, to prepare this chapter. And trust me when I say, this is not about giving up. It's about showing up for those you love, one last time. In our final message, we'll bring everything together. We'll reflect on the journey of financial independence in old age, not as a pursuit of wealth but as the quiet reclaiming of your life, your joy, and your legacy. If you've walked this far with me, thank you. Please leave a comment below. Have you started planning for your final wishes? What legacy do you hope to leave behind? And don't forget to subscribe. This community is built on wisdom, courage, and gentle truth, and I'd be honored to continue sharing this path with you. Let's move forward, one final time, together. 7. Aging with power, living with grace, and leaving a legacy that speaks without words. So here we are. You've walked with me through stories of strength and sorrow, through numbers and names, through truths you may have known in your heart but never heard spoken aloud. And now, we arrive at the most important message of all. Your final decades are not a fading. They are a crescendo. They are not the quiet dimming of a candle, but the rising warmth of a fire built slowly, steadily over years of sacrifice, resilience, and love. And that fire, my dear friend, still burns. Not to light the whole world, but to warm the people closest to you, to shine on your own soul, to give comfort, clarity, and peace to the life you've spent decades building. Let's take a moment to breathe that in. Because this message isn't about bank accounts. It's not about pensions or savings plans or legal documents. This message is about why you saved, why you worked, why you gave and gave and gave. It wasn't just for your children. It wasn't just for security. It was for this. To live your final years on your own terms with joy, with independence, with dignity. Do you remember who you were when you were 20? Maybe you were a dreamer. Maybe a caregiver. Maybe too busy to even think about your own needs. Now, at 60, 70, 80, maybe your knees ache. Maybe your phone doesn't ring as often. Maybe the mirror reflects someone you don't always recognize. But let me tell you a secret. That young version of you still lives inside you. And they are waiting. Waiting to be remembered. Waiting to pick up the pen and write the final chapters with courage and creativity and light. And do you know what helps you do that? Money. But not just any money you've claimed, protected, and directed toward your freedom. I've seen too many people reach 80 with regret. Not because they didn't have enough, but because they spent their last years watching life go by, afraid to touch it, to taste it, to chase it one more time. They didn't speak their minds because they feared upsetting family. They didn't travel because they thought they were too old. They didn't try new things because they didn't want to waste money. But what if I told you that it's not wasteful to enjoy your own life? That it's not selfish to keep your house, your space, your voice? That your story is not done until you say it is? Let me tell you about one final story. There was a father named Elias, a farmer from Kansas. Rough hands, soft heart. Raised 4 kids. Paid off every debt. Had a 5th grade education but more wisdom than most scholars I've met. When he turned 85, his children gathered to celebrate. They expected stories, maybe a few tears. But Elias surprised them. He stood up, cleared his throat, and said, "I want you to know everything I saved for me. Not because I'm selfish, but because I wanted you to see what it looks like to age with pride. I don't need a fancy funeral. I don't need a marble headstone. I need peace. So I've arranged everything. And the rest of what's left, I'm spending. The room laughed, then grew quiet. He continued, I want to fish one more time in Montana. I want to drink coffee every morning looking at the lake. I want to take a train across the country like I did when I was a boy. And I don't need permission. If I leave anything behind, it won't be in a vault. It'll be in your memories. So pay attention. That was the last time his children saw him in Kansas. For the next 2 years, he sent postcards. From lakes. From trains. From cafes where he sipped coffee and wrote poems. When he passed away at 87, the funeral was simple just like he asked. But every single one of his kids stood up and said the same thing. Dad taught me how to live, not just how to survive. Even at the end. That is legacy. That is freedom. That is power. So here is my final message for you, from one soul to another. You are not past your prime. You are at the beginning of a sacred season. A season where you no longer live for others, but with others on your terms. A season where your money doesn't just pay bills, but builds memories. A season where you stop asking for permission and start claiming your joy. Because you are still here. You are still worthy. You are still enough. So what now? Now, you begin. Maybe small. A walk in the park with a cup of your favorite tea. A call to the friend you've been meaning to reconnect with. A financial review to set aside a joy fund, no guilt allowed. A letter to your children, not about inheritance, but about love. A quiet morning where you do nothing but sit in the sun and remember, this is your life. Still. Beautifully. Unapologetically. Yours. Thank you for taking this journey with me. If even one word in these messages touched your heart, I invite you to do 3 simple things. 1. Subscribe to this channel. Let us continue to walk this path of wisdom, health, and dignity together. 2. Share this video with someone you care about. A sibling, a friend, a parent, someone who needs to know it's not too late to reclaim their peace. 3. Leave a comment below. Tell me, what's the one thing you'll do this month for yourself with no guilt, no apology, and no waiting? And until we meet again, please remember, you are not alone. You are not forgotten. And you are not finished.